The Zithor ships hovered above Earth like dark specters from the stars, their sleek vessels, gliding silently through the void with cold precision. Beneath them lay a planet that appeared to be nothing more than a fragile ball of blue and green swirling with clouds and oceans, a place they had long observed from afar, yet now it was time to claim it for themselves. Earth had been marked as a vulnerable world. Its primitive technology and lack of any significant defenses made it an easy target for conquest. The Zithor had taken many worlds in the past, and each one had fallen without much resistance. Their superior weaponry and military prowess ensured swift victories, so naturally they were confident this mission would be no different. With little more than a few scans of Earth's surface to confirm their assumptions, the Zithor commanders issued the order to land. The invasion would begin immediately. The first wave of Zithor soldiers disembarked onto Earth's soil, their armored feet pounding the ground with authority. As they moved forward, each soldier was equipped with energy weapons and advanced tech capable of annihilating anything in their path. Yet the terrain around them seemed so ordinary, so unassuming. There were no walls of defense, no high-tech shields, no armies waiting for them on the other side of a battlefield. There were only humans far below who lived out their daily routines, unaware of the approaching doom. The soldiers saw only civilians walking through the streets, going about their lives without a care in the world. It seemed almost too easy. No resistance, no fear, just people who didn't know what was coming for them. They couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction in this simple conquest. But as the Zithor moved deeper into the cities, their confidence began to waver. At first it was small things that bothered them. A soldier's communicator buzzed with static, an energy weapon failed to fire properly, a Zithor scout tripped over something unseen in the dense urban landscape. These were minor glitches, nothing to worry about. But as they continued to advance, these glitches grew more frequent. The Zithor's equipment began malfunctioning at an alarming rate, and their high-tech sensors began to flicker with strange readings. The humans didn't seem to notice, but the Zithor couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was subtly interfering with their technology. As the glitches persisted, the soldiers grew uneasy, and yet still they marched forward, dismissing these issues as simple technical errors. But as they pushed deeper into the heart of the cities, the strange occurrences intensified. Something else was at play here. The humans didn't fight back in any conventional sense. They weren't organized. They didn't have fleets of ships or massive weapons of their own, but they still moved with a purpose, their eyes sharp and aware, their footsteps quick and decisive. When Zithor soldiers attempted to capture humans or force them into submission, they found resistance in unexpected places. People fought back in ways the invaders couldn't understand. They didn't wield advanced energy guns or futuristic tools. Instead, they used the environment around them. Their surroundings became weapons. Traps were set and hidden escape routes emerged. When the Zithor thought they had cornered their prey, the humans slipped away effortlessly, disappearing into alleys or hiding in plain sight. Their tactics were primitive but effective, and the Zithor began to realize this was no ordinary world. The Zithor soldiers began to grow frustrated as they encountered more and more instances of unexplainable resistance. The humans didn't fight in the way the Zithor had anticipated. They didn't charge headfirst into battle with overwhelming firepower. They didn't engage in complex strategies or advanced tactics. They simply survived. Somehow the Zithor couldn't grasp it. No matter how many civilians they captured or how many cities they razed, the humans always seemed to escape and regroup. They adapted with an uncanny precision that was both unnerving and perplexing to the alien invaders. The Zithor leaders sat in their command ships above the planet's surface, watching the chaos unfold with growing concern. Their initial confidence had quickly turned to doubt as their mission spiraled into uncertainty. The humans weren't panicking, they weren't retreating, they weren't cowering in fear. As the Zithor had expected, they were fighting back, not with brute force, but with a kind of resilience the Zithor had never encountered before. Every time they thought they had everything under control, the humans would slip away, find new ways to strike back, and confound their every move. The more the Zithor tried to control the situation, the more it seemed that Earth itself was working against them. In one of the cities, the Zithor attempted to subdue a group of human resistance fighters who had taken refuge in an abandoned warehouse. They had tracked the group's movements for days, believing them to be simple rebels with little organization or strategy. But when the Zither breached the building, they were met with an unexpected ambush. Explosive traps detonated around them. As the humans emerged from hidden passages, armed with primitive yet effective weapons, the Zithers' advanced armor took hits they hadn't expected, and their soldiers staggered as human hands wielded tools and materials that shouldn't have been capable of such destruction. But somehow these humans weren't just fighting back, they were outsmarting the Zither at every turn. As the battle raged on, the Zither began to wonder if there was something more to this world than they had first realized. Why were the humans so relentless? Why didn't they simply surrender? Why did they fight with such unyielding determination? When faced with forces far beyond their capabilities, they could not answer these questions, but their unease grew as they encountered more and more examples of the same pattern: human ingenuity. Surviving against all odds, the humans weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for something deeper, something instinctual that the Zither couldn't quite comprehend. It was as though Earth itself was imbued with an energy that made its inhabitants almost impossible to conquer. The Zither attempted to escalate their tactics, sending in larger forces equipped with devastating weaponry to destroy entire neighborhoods in one strike, thinking this would force the humans to break. But it only made them stronger. The survivors rebuilt quickly, using what little resources they had left, rallying under new leaders who seemed to spring up from nowhere. Each new wave of destruction was met with an even stronger response from the humans, and still the Zither couldn't understand why it was happening, how they could withstand the onslaught. It wasn't until they intercepted communications between human leaders that the Zither began to understand a fraction of the truth. The humans weren't just surviving because of luck or chance. They were surviving because they refused to give in. They had faced threats and disasters throughout history, and each time they had emerged stronger and more determined. The Zither were perplexed as they sifted through the intercepted communications between Earth's leaders. The messages spoke of unity, resilience, and an unwavering resolve to defend their home planet. No matter the cost, they couldn't believe what they were reading. The humans weren't merely surviving, they were organizing, they were rallying together in ways the Zither had never expected from a species they had deemed primitive at best. The Zither had underestimated the depth of humanity's will to survive. It was a force far stronger than they had imagined, and one that wasn't easily broken. The more the Zither studied the communication channels, the more they realized that this was no mere coincidence. This was a pattern that had been repeated throughout human history time and time again. They saw evidence of humans rising up in the face of calamity, from their early wars with each other to the modern-day battles against natural disasters and pandemics. Each time they had been pushed to the brink of destruction, they found a way to adapt, to overcome the odds and rebuild. They realized this was the key, the defining characteristic that separated Earth from every other planet. They had conquered. Earth's inhabitants had an unyielding spirit. They'd fought not because they had to, but because they chose to. It was an instinct deep within them, ingrained in their very DNA, something that couldn't be measured or quantified, but something that was undeniable in every human alive. This was why no one dared attack Earth before, because they had always been underestimated. The Zither had assumed Earth's lack of advanced weaponry meant it was an easy target, but the true strength of humanity lay in its ability to endure and adapt. In one of the cities, the Zither encountered a human group of survivors, led by a woman named Ilara. She wasn't a soldier, she wasn't a commander, she was just a mother who had lost her home to the alien invasion. But she stood as a symbol of the spirit that the Zither were beginning to understand. She organized the survivors with nothing more than the will to protect her children and her people. She didn't have advanced weapons or technology, but she had something far more powerful: a belief that the fight wasn't over, and that as long as there were people willing to stand up, Earth would never fall. The Zither watched in awe as Ilara led her people in a counterattack, using only what they had scavenged from the wreckage of the cities. She set traps and ambushes with stunning precision. Her people fought with a unity that was unimaginable to the Zither, and in the end they drove the invaders out of the city. For a time, the Zither couldn't fathom how such a small and seemingly weak group of humans could stand up to their advanced forces. But it happened again and again, all over the planet, small victories against overwhelming odds. The Zithar began to realize that they weren't dealing with just any species, they were dealing with a species that had survived extinction time and time again, against forces both natural and unnatural. The Zithar commanders began to question everything they had known about Earth and its people. This was no ordinary world, and its inhabitants were no ordinary species. The Zithar had thought themselves the apex of the galaxy, but on Earth they had met a force that didn't know how to quit. It was as if Earth itself had somehow imbued its people with the strength to overcome any challenge, no matter how impossible. As the Zithar continued their invasion, they found themselves increasingly unable to predict the actions of the humans. Every attempt to crush the resistance was met with new ingenuity, new tactics, and an unexpected resilience. The alien invaders began to suspect that there was something more than just the will of the people at work, something that made Earth uniquely capable of resisting their might. They had conquered hundreds of worlds before, each one with its own culture and history, but none had reacted like this. None had fought back with such determination. It wasn't just a survival instinct, it was something deeper, something almost ingrained in the very essence of the humans themselves. The Zithar took their analysis further, delving into Earth's past to uncover any clues that could explain this unusual behavior. They sifted through records of Earth's ancient history and found story after story of civilizations rising and falling, wars being fought and lost, only for humanity to rebuild again. And again, each time they were knocked down, they rose back up stronger, more united. They found tales of human ingenuity in the face of destruction, of technologies being built from the most primitive of tools, and of people who fought not for power or glory, but for the very survival of their families and communities. It was then that the Zithar began to realize that Earth was not just a world of defenseless humans. It was a world that had been tested time and time again by forces beyond its control, and each time it had overcome adversity. But there was more to this discovery than just survival. It was the human capacity to adapt that struck the Zithar as the true key to their strength. Humanity wasn't just enduring the invaders, they were learning from them. They were adapting their tactics, evolving in real time. And every time the Zithar thought they had the upper hand, the humans found a way to turn the tables. The Zithar watched as small groups of survivors became organized cells of resistance fighters, as local militias began to coordinate their efforts, as entire cities banded together to defend their homes. It was clear that this was not a defense based on fear, but on an unshakable determination to protect what was theirs. The Zithar began to realize that the key to understanding humanity lay not in their advanced technology or military prowess, but in their sheer will to survive and their ability to adapt to any situation. They had witnessed this firsthand, as the humans employed tactics that were unorthodox yet effective against the Zithar's far superior technology. They set traps, using the terrain to their advantage. They used the very environment to fight back against the invaders in ways the Zithar had never anticipated. The Zithar tried to respond by escalating their attacks, but every escalation only seemed to fuel the fire of human resistance. The more they pushed the humans, the more they fought back, and it was starting to wear on the Zithar soldiers who had been so sure of their victory. Despite the odds against them, the humans refused to surrender, and the Zithar were forced to confront the truth. They had been so blind to Earth wasn't just a defenseless planet. It was a living, breathing world that had endured countless challenges and had developed an unbreakable spirit to face them. No matter the cost, this was not a world that would simply bow to an invading force. This was a world that would fight back with everything it had, and the Zithar began to realize they might not be able to win this war after all. The Zithar could no longer deny the truth. Their initial confidence had been shattered as they watched more and more examples of human resistance unfolding across the globe. It wasn't just a few survivors here, and there it was everywhere. Small groups of people from all walks of life were banding together to fight back against the invaders in ways that the Zithar couldn't begin to understand. It wasn't just the military leaders or the organized rebels who were putting up a fight. It was ordinary people, everyday citizens, who had no formal training in combat, yet had learned to adapt to the overwhelming threat they faced. It was clear now that the Zithar had underestimated the humans from the very beginning. The battle wasn't just being fought with weapons or technology, it was being fought with the human spirit. The more the Zithar observed the humans, the more they realized that this was not a species that could be easily defeated. They saw the resilience in the faces of the survivors, the way they found hope in the darkest of times, the way they held on to the belief that they could win no matter how insurmountable the odds appeared. They had faced invasion before, they had faced disasters that would have wiped out any other species, yet they had always managed to survive and rebuild. Now, the Zither saw that this strength was not just a fluke, it was a defining characteristic of the humans, and it was what made them so dangerous. The Zither commanders began to debate whether they had made a grave mistake in underestimating Earth's inhabitants. Their technology was advanced, but the humans had something far more potent, something that no amount of weaponry could overcome: the will to survive, and the Zither had never encountered anything like it before. The humans didn't just want to survive, they wanted to protect their home, their families, and everything they held dear, and that was a force far stronger than anything the Zither had ever faced. In their frustration, the Zither decided to launch a new strategy. They would target the heart of human civilization. They would destroy the very foundations of society. They believed that by destroying key cities and infrastructure, they could break the will of the people and force them to surrender. But when they carried out these strikes, they were met with the same response they had seen time and time again. The humans refused to crumble. They rebuilt faster than the Zither could destroy. They rallied together in the face of disaster and found new ways to fight back in the aftermath of each attack. There was no fear, there was only resolve. The humans didn't break, they didn't bow their heads in defeat. They rose up stronger than before. As the Zither began to understand more about the human psyche, they came to a disturbing conclusion. There was no easy way to defeat this species. No matter how many ships they sent, or how much destruction they caused, the humans would always fight back. They were not like the other species the Zither had conquered. They were not easily intimidated or swayed by fear. They fought not because they had to, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. They believed in the strength of their people and the power of unity. And no matter how much the Zither tried to destroy that belief, it only seemed to grow stronger. With each passing day, the Zither found themselves more and more outmatched by the unrelenting spirit of humanity. Their weapons and technology were rendered useless against the humans' adaptability. Their superior strategies failed to account for the one thing they could never control: the human heart. The Zither now faced a terrifying realization. They were not the invincible conquerors they had once believed themselves to be. They were being outsmarted and outlasted by a species they had dismissed as weak. But this was no ordinary species. The Zither began to grasp something profound about humanity that they had overlooked before. It wasn't just that humans had the will to survive, it was that they had an extraordinary capacity for learning and adapting at an alarming rate. Every defeat, every loss, seemed to only make the humans more determined to fight back. They learned from their failures and used their experiences to improve their tactics. It was a cycle of evolution that the Zither could not predict. No matter how much they studied humanity, no matter how many patterns they analyzed, the humans always found a way to overcome. The Zither decided to investigate the nature of this incredible adaptability. Their scientists began poring over data from human history. They found stories of humanity surviving against overwhelming odds, wars against alien invaders, natural disasters, pandemics, and even self-inflicted destruction. Yet each time the humans had recovered and rebuilt stronger than before. This pattern of survival wasn't just luck or coincidence. It was a core part of who they were. The humans had an innate ability to change, to evolve, to adjust to the circumstances around them, and to push forward with a determination that seemed unstoppable. The Zither had fought many species before, but none had this ability. None had the kind of deep-rooted resilience that humans possessed. One particular story caught the Zither's attention, a story from Earth's past about a global conflict known as World War I. During this time, humanity had faced the brink of annihilation. Entire nations had fought each other to the death. Yet in the face of such destruction, the human spirit had never faltered. In fact, it had strengthened humanity's resolve, had led them to develop new technologies and strategies that not only helped them win the war, but also set the stage for an era of unprecedented progress. The Zithar were shocked by this revelation. How could a species that had caused so much destruction also possess such incredible capacity for growth and innovation? It was a paradox that no other species they had encountered had ever displayed. The more the Zithar studied the humans, the more they began to see the truth that Earth was not just a defenseless planet. It was a living, breathing entity with its own resilience, and the humans were its stewards. They had learned to adapt not just as individuals, but as a collective species. They had learned to work together, to harness their strengths and support each other in times of crisis. The Zithar realized that no matter how much they tried to destroy Earth, no matter how much technology they used to try to overpower the humans, they could never break the spirit that drove them to protect their home. Even as the Zithar continued their assault, the humans began to develop new strategies to counter the alien forces. They used their knowledge of the land, the cities, and the environment to set traps and launch surprise attacks against the invaders. Their guerrilla tactics were unmatched, and the Zithar began to lose ground as they struggled to keep up with the human ingenuity that seemed to emerge from every corner of the planet. It became clear to the Zithar that they were fighting not just against an enemy, but against the very essence of humanity's will to survive and to protect its home. No weapon, no technology, no force in the universe could defeat this indomitable spirit. The more the Zithar learned, the more they realized that their initial arrogance had been their greatest mistake. They had believed themselves superior in every way: their technology, their military prowess, their advanced strategies, but they had underestimated the very thing that made humanity unique: its capacity for survival and unity. No matter how many ships they sent or how many battles they won, the humans always found a way to come back stronger. The Zithar commanders convened in their ships above Earth and began to discuss their next move. But the conversation was no longer about how to crush the humans. It was about how to deal with the fact that Earth was not a world that could be conquered easily. It was a world that would fight to its last breath. As they deliberated on their options, a chilling realization spread across the Zithar ranks. The more they pushed the humans, the more the resistance seemed to grow stronger and more organized. Entire cities were rising up against the alien forces. Even in the midst of devastation, the survivors were not scattered in fear. They were rallying together, and the Zithar couldn't fathom how this was possible. How were the humans able to adapt so quickly to every challenge thrown at them? No matter how advanced their technology was, the Zithar were beginning to feel that the humans were something different, something unlike any species they had encountered before. One of the Zithar commanders spoke up, suggesting that the only way to stop the human resistance was to break their will to survive completely, but others disagreed. Some argued that the humans' resolve was so deeply ingrained that it couldn't be shattered by force alone. They had seen this on the ground, where even after their most destructive attacks, the humans had always rebuilt and fought back with more ferocity than before. The Zithar were faced with a dilemma. They had never encountered a species that didn't fear death or destruction, a species that didn't break when faced with impossible odds. The more they tried to conquer Earth, the more they began to realize that Earth wasn't a place to be controlled, it was a place to be respected. On the surface below, the humans were not just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting for something greater than their own survival. They were fighting for their homes, their children, their future. And as the battles intensified across the globe, the resistance began to unify like never before. Leaders emerged from every corner of the planet. Men and women who were once ordinary civilians now became symbols of hope and strength. They fought not just for victory, but for the preservation of everything that made their world special. One of the most inspiring movements was taking place in the ruins of a once thriving metropolis, now reduced to rubble by Zithar bombs. A group of survivors, led by a man named Thaddeus, had begun organizing a massive effort to rebuild the city from the ground up. They didn't have much in terms of technology or supplies, but they had an unwavering belief that they could restore their home. The Zithar were stunned by the speed at which the humans were able to work despite the odds and the lack of resources. Entire sections of the city began to be rebuilt as makeshift shelters were erected and small pockets of resistance emerged in the abandoned buildings. The Zithar couldn't believe their eyes. It was as if the humans were more than capable of surviving. They were thriving in the face of devastation. The Zithar realized that they had made a grave miscalculation. Earth was not simply a world of survivalists, but a world of fighters and builders who had long since learned that destruction was not the end, but only the beginning of a new struggle, a struggle to rebuild, to create, to fight for something worth saving. The Zither had thought that by inflicting enough destruction, they could break humanity's spirit, but the more they attacked, the more they realized that humanity's strength didn't come from their weapons or technology. It came from their hearts and their unity. The more they tried to annihilate Earth, the more the humans rallied together and rebuilt faster than the Zither could destroy. And now the invaders were facing a dilemma they had never encountered before. They were fighting not just for control, but against an unstoppable force of will. As the Zither watched human leaders coordinate their efforts across the globe, it became evident that the humans had formed an unbreakable network of resistance. They had begun to share knowledge and resources across countries and continents, no longer separated by borders or politics. They were unified under a single purpose: to protect their world, to protect each other. And the more the Zither tried to shatter that unity, the more it seemed to strengthen humanity's resolve. The resistance fighters didn't just want to survive, they wanted to ensure the future of their children and their civilization. And that was something the Zither could not take away. Desperate, the Zither attempted a final assault, a full-scale bombardment that would leave no part of Earth untouched. They unleashed everything they had, from their most devastating weapons to their deadliest combat forces. They hoped to wipe the humans off the face of the planet once and for all. But as the explosions rained down from above, and the cities burned, the humans did something the Zither never expected. They didn't run, they didn't hide, they fought back. With everything they had, they launched counterattacks from the rubble. They set traps and ambushes. They used the ruins of their cities to launch guerrilla operations against the invaders. And slowly but surely they began to push the Zither back. As the tide of battle began to shift, the Zither commanders were forced to consider something they had never thought possible. Maybe Earth wasn't a world that could be conquered after all. Maybe it was a world that couldn't be beaten by force alone. Maybe this was a world that fought for more than just survival. It fought for its very soul. The Zither had never encountered a species that would willingly sacrifice everything to protect their home. But Earth's people were doing just that. They weren't just fighting against the invaders, they were fighting for their legacy, for their right to exist as they always had. In the final confrontation, the Zither forces were pushed to their limits. The humans used every tactic at their disposal, from ancient strategies to modern innovations. Their tenacity was unmatched, and the Zither began to retreat as the resistance grew stronger and stronger across the planet. The Zither realized they were facing something they had never prepared for: a species whose strength didn't lie in its weapons or technology, but in its capacity to unite and rise together, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the last of the Zither ships fled Earth's atmosphere, the humans stood victorious, their cities scared but intact, their homes still standing. The invaders had underestimated them. From the very beginning, they had assumed that Earth was a weak and defenseless planet. But in the end, they had discovered the truth: no one dares attack Earth, not because of its technology or military might, but because it is a planet of warriors and survivors who will never bow to anyone and will always rise again.